2013 A levels question 8 subsection 1. This is a very common question. Lamai. Distinguish between absolute advantage and comparative advantage. In production, illustrate your answer giving numerical examples. Very easy, no? Like a MCQ where you have numbers, you can give an explain. So what is absolute advantage, Lamai? Can you all tell me? What should we write here? Absolute advantage. What do you need to say? Give me a second until I put my phone to charge. What can you write about absolute advantage now? What is the main thing that you have to highlight? When a country can produce, when a country can produce an output or produce a good at a lesser cost than another country. No, when a country can produce their output at a lesser cost than another country, it would have the absolute advantage in producing that good when you can produce at a lesser cost. So then, Lamai, to produce at a lesser cost, what should happen? Either with the same amount of inputs, you should be producing a higher output. That's the output approach. No? If you can produce a higher output than the other country with the same amount of inputs, your cost is low. Let's say me with 100 labor, if I can produce 1,000 goods, let's say Sri Lanka with 100 labor units, if Sri Lanka can produce 1,000 goods, and in India with 100 labor, they can produce only 500 goods. So our unit cost is low, no? By paying 100 people, we are producing 1,000. Those people by 100 people, by paying them, they are only producing 500. So that's the output approach of it, right? How can you have a lesser cost? You should be producing more output than another country with the same inputs. That is one way. Or you should be using lesser inputs, lesser labor hours is the input approach. You should be using lesser inputs to produce the same output. Produce the same output. So you can talk about this. Then Nama, you can also say, is this theory a complete theory, absolute advantage? Is it a complete theory or are there flaws in this? What about that? You can say that now when you're distinguishing between the two, you can say, Lama. You can say, right, absolute advantage, flaws in sense, problems, issues. Right? You can say it's not a complete theory. Why? Because there can be certain instances where one country can have, right? One country can have the absolute advantage for both the goods. In this situation, international trade cannot take place. So therefore, it's not really a complete theory. There are flaws, there are limitations. And then, Lamai, you can give a numerical example now. You can give like a table, Lamai, the one that you all have in MCQs. So you can say Sri Lanka, this is India, this is garments, this is motor vehicles. Maybe you can use an output approach, some numbers and say, look here, Sri Lanka can produce 100 garments, 50 vehicles, India can produce this much and this much. And you explain, Lamai, according to this, these people have the absolute advantage for this, these people have the absolute advantage for this, that kind of thing. So now for that, Lamai, you all will get 2 marks. You have to write absolute and comparatively. Then after you do that, now you go to comparative advantage in your calculation, in your question. So under comparative advantage, now you give a definition. You say, look here, comparative advantage is where it's a more complete theory than the absolute advantage theory. This is where a country will have the comparative advantage if they can produce at what, Lamai? They can produce at a lower opportunity cost, not lower cost, lower opportunity cost than another country. Then they will have the comparative advantage. Okay, you have to highlight that. So here also, Lamai, then you can, there is no approaches wise distinguishing to give there. Example of producing one unit using labor hours. Yes. Even labor hours, no problem. Okay. And then you can give in your example, Lamai. Maybe ideally, take the same example. Take the same numbers that you use for absolute. Now you can say, if we now use the same data, right? This is how it will look like. Calculate and show. Opportunity cost of this country is this much. Opportunity cost of this country of producing this good is this much. So this country only has the low opportunity cost. So therefore, they have the comparative advantage. You can do that. And you can say, Labai, this is a more complete theory. And international trade is determined based on this. So whether what good you trade and what good you specialize in is determined based on comparative advantage, not based on absolute. So you can say comparative advantage is a more complete theory, and whichever country who has the comparative advantage would specialize in the production of that good and trade that good with another. Now you can give in something like that and then give your numerical example also. You get your 2 marks there. Now these are easy questions. Now these type of questions, not that you don't know the difference between comparative and absolute. No, you all definitely know. Numerical example also, we have done more than enough MCQs for you to know. Where you go wrong is you can't write. You write complete nonsense. Now that is why I keep on saying past papers, mock exams, whatever, just reading the answer is not going to help you. Learning theory alone is not going to help you, because there is no more theory that you have to learn here. Absolute advantage, you know the theory. Comparative advantage, you know the theory. What you don't know is to properly structure an answer and put it into writing. I'm repeatedly saying this, and now with 2 months to go, even now, if you're not still writing answers, you're falling back real time. Okay, I know it's a very easy excuse to give, sir, I have not studied the syllabus yet, sir. After studying only, I will start doing questions. You keep giving that bullshit excuse. You will finish studying the syllabus, let's say, maybe by the end of December. You will not have time to write answers. You will never get this. Even if you have not finished, you have to now start. That is the thing. That's the same thing that I tell in the mock exam series also. For all those who ask me, without knowing anything, you can't write answers. I agree. But at least with the something that you know, you have to now start. So whether you are part of any mock exam series or anything, that doesn't matter. All the subjects, now you have to start writing. If that is not happening, no point. At least for a day, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, you have to sit and write. And sit and write your MCQ in a way. Write some essay questions. Maybe now in a mock exam also, we mark every paper. So if you all also must be going to some class, right? You all also must be doing certain papers. Your school teacher might be there. Write past papers, well, to write answers. Give those for marking also. Just writing also no point, no, because otherwise you don't know where you stand. You don't know what kind of marks you can get. Is this answer correct? Is this answer wrong? Where can I improve? Just writing 100 pages also, because write it, maybe get it marked, see any feedback that is there. And also mock exam people, don't just write and submit your paper. Once you get your paper back, check for the feedback, right? They would have told, no, right, improve on this, work on this, this is what you can do, those have to happen. No point doing all of this, right? That's question 8 part 1. Then this one, question 8 part 2. State the economic factors which might determine the patterns of trade between countries. Because what do you think they're asking over here? Patterns of trade. What are they asking over here? Last paper, they asked you about this reasons for comparative advantage. They asked you certain reasons, sources of comparative advantage. Lamai metana, they are asking the same thing, Lamai. Okay, so explain the economic factors which might determine the patterns of trade. So patterns of trade can who trades, right? Whether do I trade this good or do I trade that good? Which good do I specialize in? Those kind of things is what you call the patterns of trade. Who specializes and exports garment? Who specializes and export tea? Right? So what are the factors, Lamai? Now here you will have to explain a few factors. So you can talk about your factor endowment, right? You can say your factor endowment, or you can even talk about You can even talk about your factor abundance, how much of factors you have. So you can kind of explain, let's say, for example, uh, a country like China, they have a very high amounts of labor. Labor is abundant in China. So as a result, they are, able to produce manufacturing goods. Okay, let's say electronics, let's say any manufacturing good, they are able to produce at a very lower cost. So they will be the ones who will be producing. So the pattern of trade is decided that way. China is the country in the world who is the biggest exporter. They are the ones selling all these manufactured items. And then, Lamai, what else? You can talk about the same other factors. Differences in productivity, same thing. Productivity differences, uh, the climate. Now, even let's take, Lamai, in, let's say, what can I give? Now, for example, let's say even this, now New Zealand. New Zealand is the one with production of milk and all of that. So on one end, they have the abundance of factors. They have a lot of cows, and also they have the environment for the cows, like the cool, nice environment with grasslands. They have so much of huge land available. They have that. It's supporting it. Those kind of things is what you're right. Same thing, Lama, I told you. Same thing they can ask you in different ways. Answer is the same, but the question they ask you in different ways. So what are the other factors that you can give? You can talk about consumer taste and preferences, right? Right? Yes, goodwill you can give, Lama. Taste and preferences, government policies, the same stuff that we wrote there, you can put in over here. Is that okay? 2013 question number 2. Okay. And Lamai, when you get a question in your paper, even if you don't know now, done right? Because you have been studying for 2 years now. No? Now, sometimes the question might look like a very tough question, but the answer might be a very simple thing. So whatever that you know, right, don't leave questions blank, okay? Because you leave questions blank, there is no way they can give you marks. You write some nonsense, don't write complete nonsense, right? But something, at least they can give you half a mark, no? So don't leave questions blank. Then Lamai, question number 3. Compare and contrast the global and regional approaches to reducing barriers to international trade. Now, what are these barriers to international trade? These tariff barriers, those are all barriers. No? Protectionism is what you call a barrier. And these tariffs and all of those are barriers. So you tell me, compare and contrast, okay, the global and regional approaches, yes, economic scale, fine, right, to reducing barriers in international trade. What and what can be tried? Give me some answers in certain approaches that we have taken to reduce barriers. Bit of a good question, I will say. Tell me. You can mainly talk about, Lamai, you can talk about these trade agreements. You can talk about now certain approaches we have taken, Lamai, are these trade agreements. So trade agreements is one way to reduce the barriers for international trade. There are bilateral trade agreements. What are bilateral trade agreements? Bilateral trade agreements කියන්නේ ළමයි. 2. You form a trade agreement with just one other country. Let's say Indo-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, Indo-Sri Lanka Pakistan Free Trade Agreement. Those are all bilateral trade agreements. Then also multilateral trade agreements. Okay, so multilateral trade agreements is where within your region, so you have SAFTA, right? You have those kind of things, the South Asian Free Trade Agreement. Those kind of stuff, even NAFTA, North American Free Trade, those are another regional, yes, AFTA, right? Those are all regional trade agreements. All of this helps in what, Lamai? Helps with reducing barriers. So you can talk about how it helps. You can talk about how the tariffs are eliminated, right? How this improves the amounts of trade. You can talk about those. So those are more like, Lamai, regional approaches. And cannot tell me any global approach. Whole worldwide, what kind of approaches have they taken? There is even Lama, you can talk about the role of exactly. Talk about the role of the World Trade Organization. You can say now World Trade Organization Lama, every year there is like a trade summit where all the people in one country, I don't know who exactly represents. Sometimes the president represents it, sometimes like someone into these economic international affairs and all, they represent it. And they have like these huge summits, right, where they discuss how we can reduce these barriers. Uh, I'm not sure if the Earth Summit and Trade Summit is them, right? They have these big trade summits where you've seen that, right? In movies and all also, there's a representative from each country. They'll be sitting on a desk and waiting, right? Maybe big, huge round table discussions, to reduce different barriers, what we can do. Those kind of global approaches have also been taken. So what is now? They are asking us to now compare and contrast. No? So when comparing, you can say whatever global law, whatever regional approach, they will reduce the barriers. They will reduce the amount of tariffs. They will improve the flow of international trade. Those are like the similarities. Then the differences, Lamai, which one do you think is easier to maybe negotiate and get into? Is it a global level agreement or more like a regional level agreement with your neighboring countries or with your next door country? What is easier? What is easier to this thing? More like a regional one, no? Now, why do you think Sri Lanka has trade agreements with? Now, what are Sri Lanka's three main trade agreements? Bilateral. We have a Indo-Sri Lanka free trade agreement. We have a Pakistan Sri Lanka. Who is the other country that we have a trade agreement with? We only have three: Indo-Sri Lanka, Pakistan Sri Lanka, and we have a Singapore Sri Lanka free trade agreement. We are trying to get in with a few other countries, Thailand, different stuff. That was there somewhere. I remember in one of the mock exam papers was there, no? The countries that we are planning to get into, right? So we only have three, four now. Now, just think, Lamai, all of those are Asian countries, no? India, our next door neighbor. Pakistan, little bit above them. Singapore on the east side. And we are trying to get also with with Thailand, with China, all Asian countries. Because why? It's easier, Lamai. That's why these regional approaches are much more easier to negotiate and much more quicker, we'll say, rather than getting into like a global approach, getting all the countries to agree. Right now, when you have, let's say, like a trade summit or something, some countries might not agree. Maybe the World Trade Organization will say, look here, right, we want to promote, reduce the barriers. Let's try to, for whatever good that we import or export, let's cap the tariff rate at 5%. Let's not charge more than that. Then we can improve international trade. Let's say World Trade Organization comes up with a proposal like that. Example, they say, let's cap it at 5%. Let's not charge more. Some countries will say, no, we can't do this. Sorry, right? We need to do this, right? Some countries will agree. So at that level, to get all the countries to agree and come to a agreement is not easy. But let's say Sri Lanka, India, now the South Asian Free Trade Agreement, right? Let's say Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, those countries are maybe, if those 5, 6 countries, if they agree and say, right, within our countries, if we are trading, we'll try to reduce barriers as much as possible. Even if there is a tariff, we'll keep it at only 5%. Easier to agree, no? More likelihood that it will agree than the whole world agree. So that's why, Lamai, these regional approaches are much more easier to implement. And it's much more common and widely used than more like a global approach. So you can write all of those, Lamai. So this kind of is like a good question to talk about. Is that okay? Fine. Yes. Go through the answer also. There will be some certain new stuff. Now, these 2013 Nilamai. So some old stuff that were there 5, 6 years ago, they might talk about those, not 5, 6, like when 2013, 5, 6 years old, they will talk what happened in 2008. Those stuff they might talk. It's an old question, so the answer might have some old information as well. Let's go. Okay, let me know, Lamai, 2013, is there anything else? Anything else from unit number 9? Just check subsection 4 or 5 or whatever. Is it unit number 9? It's no. Someone. What's the fifth question? I don't know. 2013. Fifth question is on. Give me a second. Export earnings. Will come to that in unit number 10. It's there in unit number 9 also. When we talk about BOP trade account, will come. Okay, right. That's it with this then.